Hi everyone, it's Philosophical Phoenix again, and we last week wrapped up the topic of judgment with all of its subcategories, and we are going to be moving on to the nature of opposites as a larger topic with some subtopics that we'll take one at a time. And the first of these I call What is the Shape of Time? Um, we commonly refer to time as the fourth dimension. And of course, the first three involve space, length, width, and height. And then time comes in as a dimension that we move through without perceiving it, outside of ourselves. Some of the facets of the fourth dimension we can grasp with our senses. For example, we do understand the effects of time, although probably not as much as we tend to think we understand. um, we can see the effects of time on physical objects, including, biological, living creatures, and also inanimate objects. Both are shaped by time. The biological breakdown of old age, which I am currently experiencing, um, that in itself, of course, is variable between species and individuals among species as well. But then we also see it in landscapes. We see it through erosion and canyons and mountains and the very shape of the land and the oceans around us. So we understand time as a force that is active in shaping the other three dimensions, um, length, width, and height. And yet, humanity has disagreed at times vigorously on the shape of time itself. And we can divide the schools of thought largely into Western and Eastern. And our society, of course, is the Western um, mindset, which came originally from Greece and Rome as well. Greco-Roman philosophy was the seminal influence on all of Western society. So the Greeks argued, time is obviously linear. It goes from A to B in a straight line, forward direction only. A moment lost, you can never get it back. We say time is money and money is God, so get your ass in gear and seize the day. Carpe diem. And the one I really hate personally is YOLO. You only live once. I don't happen to believe that, since I believe in reincarnation, but it's a typical Western view of things: beginning, middle, and nothing else. History in textbooks, you see timelines, and we've all had to sit there as students and memorize all of these dates and people and events and battles and cities and whatever on a timeline, um, which can be extremely dull, which history is really not at all boring, but we tend to make it boring somehow. So yeah, time moves inexorably forward. You can't slow it down, you can't speed it up, you can never revisit the same moment twice. And you know, we end up with this incredibly stupefying long line of history, of time, the way that we see it. And I personally, when I was dating my husband, I used to drive the I-5 between San Francisco area to LA and back, and that drive was exactly how I always imagined timelines to be: very dull, very endless, flat desert scrubland, just punctuated occasionally by orange groves, gas stations, um, maybe a picnic area, or the horrific stench of newly fertilized farmland. Um, you know, that was a physical kind of representation of what we tend to learn in school about history and time. So, is that really the entirety, though, of what we see reflected in the natural world of which we are a part? Um, just forward progress, zero repetition. Um, in one sense, yeah, it's all true. You can never revisit a moment. That's why it's so important to be so careful with your time. And that is absolutely important to humans as a species and as individuals. But in another sense, it's not accurate. It's not, at least it's not complete. And the Eastern form of thought sees time as circular and repetitive, basically, just constantly repeating. And Nietzsche, Nietzsche was in a bad mood one day and just said, "Time is a flat circle," and he was right in the sense that that is the Eastern view, not as a flat circle, but it is repetitious and circular. And we can see that's demonstrably true as well. It's just as true as the timeline. Day becomes night, becomes day, becomes night, as the planet rotates every 24 hours. Winter becomes spring, becomes summer, becomes autumn, becomes winter, becomes spring, rinse and repeat. So we see this repetition, this circular, cyclical movement with each revolution of the planet around the sun every year. And we see change, though, as much as we see repetition. They're not inseparable. Um, Human nature reflects the truth of this as well. Um, and think about, it's our nature to crave stability, but at the same time, we really yearn for change. Um, and that's because we need both, and we exist within both. Um, it does seem contradictory on its face when you approach it with this Western mindset of either or, pick one. You can't have both. Um, Yet the true nature of the universe is reflected around us. It's repeating cycles it progresses. So the line is true, but the circle is also true. And you combine them in this spiraling cycle that goes on and on. And we are actually in a realm of spirals. Two opposite realities held in this tension that creates cycles of change and yet repetition simultaneously. Duality is what it actually is. It's not one thing or the other, it's both. Every day and night is the same, and yet everyone is also unique. Not one of them is like the next. So it's a realm of duality. It's both always and never the same. And our perceived reality tells us clearly that it's a duality. It's not something that you need to struggle to choose one or the other. We often tend to torture ourselves needlessly by insisting, no, you can't have both. You have to pick one. No, actually, it is both. And we need to learn to embrace that and all of the potential that it holds. It's actually really exciting once you get used to combining those two. And we in the West, we grow up being taught that life is a battle between good and evil. It's between light and dark, death and life, day and night. And these are always portrayed in polarized terms of being opposites that are in conflict. And at the same time, our environment reflects the truth that you can't separate them. It's not that you can't have both, it's that you must have both. You can't have one without the other. And, it's physically quite obvious when you think of shadows. Shadows are dependent on light to exist. And at the same time, light would be nothing. It would have no distinguishing features without darkness. Complementary yet opposite. And Western awareness has been growing toward this, along with our growing openness to Eastern concepts in general. And we've been learning to incorporate them. And that is a really healthy thing, I believe. Excuse me. So, mutual dependence is what we see, or better, you could think of it as symbiosis. It's a mutually beneficial relationship. And in a word, it's balance. And that's a concept that has been emphasized more and more in our society, which I believe is a good thing. It's integral to our existence. And death, it's not an enemy that we have to overcome. It's not an ending, it's a separation, which is why we see it as an ending. But it's rather an integral part of a possibly eternal cycle. Life to death to rebirth. You never see one without the other two. In these ever greater spirals that, as far as we know, with our limited knowledge of existence, they may go on infinitely. And nature teaches us this over and over, reflects it to us. The mathematical expression of a spiral is the Fibonacci sequence, and I am not a math girl. I flunked Algebra 1 3 times, so I'm no math genius whatsoever. But the Fibonacci sequence is actually exciting. If you want to look it up, it's found everywhere in nature, and you see it in. It's actually astounding how perfect nature is in creating these spirals. That they can be measured mathematically, and you see it in the delicate pink curve of seashells, or in the fossilized remains of ancient creatures, ammonites, or you see it in the springtime on the forest floor with the curled up ferns just beginning to come out of the ground. Especially the fiddlehead ferns. They are just perfect, beautiful little spirals, baby ferns. And of course, thinking larger on a cosmic scale, the shape of our own galaxy, the Milky Way, is also a spiral. And many other galaxies as well. Not all, but many. And humans first expressed this. I did some hasty and shallow research, but it was Acharya Pingala. I'm sure that I mispronounced that terribly. Ancient poet and mathematician in India. So he is the earliest known human source, and it was actually connected through Sanskrit prosody, which is the study of meter and verse in Vedic poetry. So it's actually the precision of mathematics combined with the creativity of poems. So that, again, is an example of the tension that you hold between the opposites, and it creates a balance, and that's where we live. So yeah, the approximate dates to work with were 450 to 200 BC, but I'm sure, nobody I care about that because I'm a nerd. Um, and in fact, when we go inward, not just outward to the galaxy, but we go inward to the microcosm, the universe that our body is, in so many ways. We are made of spirals. You look at it and you see it obviously in DNA, the double helix. And the more that you explore spirals in nature, the more sacred and amazing their shape becomes. At least that was the case for me. And no matter what you may believe privately about life, the universe, and everything, cyclical motion is inescapable. We've got to make peace with the reality we live in now if we want to experience the heights of joy and the depths of peace that we're made for, that we crave, and yet we so often collectively fail to even come close to grasping these things that are available to us. So I would just encourage, if you are interested in this, just look around you for spirals. Look in nature and see how many you can find. It's fascinating, and a sunflower is another example. I happen to have a phobia of sunflowers, which is probably the stupidest thing, the stupidest fear that you guys have ever heard of. I have no idea why, but just the sunflowers with the huge dark centers really scared me as a child, and they still kind of creep me out. But they're amazing. They're wonderful. That's my failing, not the sunflowers. And a lot of you probably know that they have a spiral if you look in the center and you take it outward, it's a perfect Fibonacci sequence spiral. And once we grasp the whole concept of just moving through time in cycles, repetitive yet unique, it becomes a lot easier to trust the nature of the universe to take us where we need to go, because this is what we were made for. And once we can start seeing that, things get pretty exciting. So I hope you guys enjoyed that, and we will be going on to explore the balance of opposites further moving forward. But yeah, I am probably going to share a poem in the next few days, just to change it up a little, and in honor of the spiral and time itself. And I hope you guys have a beautiful rest of your week. Take care.